the thing about the final act to me is it feels very tacked on because nothing about Afghanistan is mentioned into the movie until that very moment where they just so happen to go to Afghanistan and all this stuff takes place. Afghanistan feels like it comes out of left field. Historically speaking, it makes sense.
But if you ask me which one feels more tacked on, I kind of think the prologue feels a bit tacked on because
but we go back to
the defection. We only go back to it with the Smeart Spionum thing. But the
the prologue's when they're on the Rock of Gibraltar.
Yeah, and it's the prologue. It's just an action scene to introduce our new Bond, and then the only thing that carries over is the Smeart Spionum thing. And I'm not against the prologue. Yeah. Like I'm not against it, but when Bond says, "Well, we must have scared the living daylights out of her," I get the sense that was the end of the prologue. Right? That was supposed to lead into our title sequence.
Whoever she was must have scared the living daylights out of her.
I think the original prologue was supposed to be the defection.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And maybe they felt like it was a little underwhelming or something because the prologue as it stands, I think is a lot of fun, you know. But mate, you're dead.
Yeah, hold on, you're dead.
I enjoy it, and I like that the bad guy's like, no! Like, who doesn't love when bad guys yell no? And obviously, the Smeart Spionum thing is carried through, at least so far as M gives it to Bond, and then Bond never uses it. But that almost feels more tacked on than Afghanistan, because, like, I get what you're saying, but Afghanistan still, it has some purpose. They kind of needed to milk the office in the plane gag a little bit more, because it literally just starts with M just gets up and is like already walking around. Clearly what they were trying to do was like have M seated and he's talking and then he gets up and we realize we're in a plane, and they kind of like cut that a little bit, and I don't know why. Maybe it wasn't working, but it's like they needed to milk that a little bit more.
So off of that, like that was the one thing that I thought was a little, I don't want to say strange, but it was something that they were trying to do with this movie to kind of maybe set the beginning of all these new Bond films, was that like prior to this, John Glenn's like saying, okay, we're not doing gadgets. Like we're going to kind of like tone down gadgets. We're not going to make the movie Moonraker where everything's a damn gadget. And then they kind of backtrack with that when we got to the last movie where we had all these kind of silly, obnoxious gadgets where we didn't have any like, there was no setup and payoff with the gadgets where like Hugh says, okay, there's this gadget and it does this thing. And then later in the movie, we see it do this thing in different ways. Yep. This movie does that.
What's my code?
Oh, most appropriate. A wolf whistle.
You mean,
Which I think is something we're going to see more in the next movies. But it also kind of set this specific weird tone where it's like, yeah, we're trying to do more serious, but we're just gonna steep this like comic book Bond spy. You know, we see the moment where he pulls up to the place and the rake like spins around because it's a radar and it detects he has weapons and things like that. And then even the line like where he's talking about he's trying to figure out which KGB agent this could have been, and it's like she impersonates children and she kills people with teddy bears, you know,
exploding
like,
teddy bears.
And like then we see the ghetto blaster.
Something we're making for the Americans. It's called a ghetto blaster.
As I always say, the world of James Bond is ridiculous, and a little girl killing people with teddy bears is like not that goofy or crazy.
It wasn't something I hated about the movie. It's just something that they're like, okay, we're going to set up how gadgets are going to be utilized in this world and how they like a thing can look like something else, but it's like kind of trying to modernize that idea. And they try to do that throughout this movie. Yeah. And I don't think it hurts the movie. It's just something I noticed as I'm watching.
Obviously, I have to point out that right before the teddy bear thing, they point out a Russian KGB assassin who murders people by strangling them with her thighs. Who does that sound like?
Assassination methods, strangulation with hands or thighs.
We'll get there. We'll get to my beloved, my sweet beloved. Yeah,
we can't use that line. Hey, we can't use that line in this one because there was definitely heroin in this movie.